Did you know that the person who laid the foundation for the entire field of biology lived more than 2,000 years ago? His ideas influenced not just science, but philosophy, ethics, and even how we understand the natural world today. And even though his work dates back to ancient Greece, many of the terms and concepts we use in biology today trace right back to him. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Speak English Fluently channel, where we not only improve our English, but also dive into fascinating topics from history, science, and beyond. Today, we'll be discussing Aristotle, also known as the father of biology. Along the way, we'll be learning new words and phrases that you can use to boost your English vocabulary. So make sure to subscribe to our channel because we'll be learning together. Let's explore this topic and learn some cool words in English.
So, Emily, today we're talking about Aristotle. Pretty interesting, right? I mean, we all know he's called the father of biology, but do you know why?
Oh, definitely. Aristotle's contributions to biology were huge. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was one of the first people to systematically study living organisms. He classified animals, studied their anatomy, and even wrote about plant life. But before we dive too deep, let's help our viewers. What do you think, John? Let's start with a word we might hear a lot today: intention. What's the meaning of intention?
Good question. Intention means a purpose or plan. It's what someone plans to do. For example, Aristotle had the intention to understand the natural world through observation and analysis.
Exactly. Now moving on to the man himself. Aristotle was born in 384 BC in Stagira, Greece. He became one of the greatest minds of ancient history. He studied under Plato and taught Alexander the Great. But more importantly, he had a curious mind about how things worked in nature.
Oh, that's a good word. Curious. What does curious mean, Emily?
Curious means wanting to know or learn something. Aristotle was very curious about nature, and that's why he observed animals and plants so closely. I guess you could say his curiosity is what led him to become the father of biology.
And what about the word observe? We're going to be using that one a lot today.
Great point. Observe means to watch something carefully, especially to learn something about it. Aristotle observed animals in their natural habitats to learn more about their behaviors and classifications.
Speaking of which, classification was one of his biggest contributions to biology. He was the first to really attempt to classify living organisms based on their similarities and differences. For instance, he divided animals into those with blood and those without blood, which is what we might think of today as vertebrates and invertebrates.
You're right. He also used terms that are still important in biology today, like genus and species. What's the meaning of species? That's an important word in biology.
Species refers to a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. So, when Aristotle classified animals, he was essentially grouping them into species, although his definitions were a little different from the ones we use today.
Yes, and it's amazing how his work laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the modern classification system we use today in biology. You know, another word we'll probably use a lot today is foundation. Do you know what that means?
Foundation means the basis or groundwork of something. For example, Aristotle's work laid the foundation for modern biology. Without his contributions, the field wouldn't be what it is today.
Exactly. Aristotle's biological works are actually part of a larger set of his writings called the Corpus Aristotelicum. But did you know he didn't just write about biology? He also wrote about ethics, politics, and metaphysics. Metaphysics is another good word. What does that mean?
Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with the nature of reality, including the relationship between mind and matter, substance and attribute. Aristotle explored some pretty deep questions, like what it means to exist and what is the essence of things.
He really was a multi-talented thinker, wasn't he? And what's interesting is that Aristotle's method of scientific inquiry was based on observation, experimentation, and reasoning, which are all essential parts of modern science today. Let's break down some of those words for our viewers. First, inquiry. What does that mean, John?
Inquiry means the act of asking questions to gather information. Aristotle conducted a lot of inquiries into how animals and plants worked.
Right. And what about experimentation? I think that's another important term.
Experimentation is the process of performing a scientific procedure, especially in a controlled environment, to test a hypothesis. Aristotle didn't do experiments the way we think of them today, but he still relied on observations to form conclusions about the natural world.
Yeah, he was more of an observer than an experimentalist, but his work still paved the way for future scientists like Charles Darwin, who expanded on Aristotle's ideas about classification and evolution. And speaking of evolution, that's another important concept. Can you explain what evolution means?
Sure. Evolution refers to the process by which different kinds of living organisms develop and diversify from earlier forms over time. Although Aristotle didn't understand evolution as we do today, his ideas about how living things change and adapt to their environment were a stepping stone toward the modern theory of evolution.
That's a great explanation. It's fascinating how many of Aristotle's ideas were ahead of his time. And even though some of his theories were later proven wrong, like his belief in spontaneous generation, do you know what that is?
Yes. Spontaneous generation is the idea that living organisms can arise from non-living matter, like the belief that maggots could just appear out of rotting meat. Aristotle thought this was true, but we now know through science that living things only come from other living things.
Right. That's a good example of how science evolves over time. As we learn more, we can refine or even completely change ideas that were once accepted as fact. I think refine is a good word to explain here. What do you think, John?
Definitely. Refine means to improve something by making small changes. Over time, scientists refined Aristotle's theories to better fit the evidence we have today.
You know, I'm really impressed by how Aristotle's curiosity led him to observe the world in such detail. His curiosity is something that should inspire all of us to keep asking questions and learning, don't you think?
Absolutely. Curiosity is the key to discovery, and Aristotle's life is proof of that. Whether we're learning English or studying biology, the important thing is to stay curious and keep learning.
That's so true. And since we're talking about Aristotle's curiosity, it's worth mentioning how diverse his interests were. Did you know that he also made important contributions to the field of rhetoric?
Rhetoric? That's a great one. What does rhetoric mean?
Rhetoric is the art of persuasion, or how to use language effectively to influence others. Aristotle actually wrote a book called Rhetoric, where he outlined techniques for persuasive speech. His three main appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos, are still taught today. Let's break those down for our viewers, starting with ethos.
Right, ethos. Ethos refers to credibility or ethical appeal. When someone uses ethos, they try to persuade by showing they're trustworthy or an expert on the topic. For example, Aristotle's extensive studies made him an authority on many subjects.
Exactly. Then we have pathos, which is all about emotional appeal. If you want to persuade someone using pathos, you try to connect with their emotions. For example, in politics or advertising, people often use stories or images to evoke emotions like fear or joy.
And finally, there's logos, which means logical appeal. When you use logos, you try to persuade people by using facts, statistics, or logical arguments. Aristotle believed that good rhetoric combines ethos, pathos, and logos to be truly effective.
It's amazing how Aristotle's theories on rhetoric are still so relevant. Think about how we use these techniques in modern speeches, debates, or even writing. This also reminds me of another key aspect of Aristotle's work, his studies in aesthetics. John, what's the meaning of aesthetics?
Aesthetics refers to the study of beauty and art. Aristotle was really interested in what makes something beautiful or enjoyable to experience. In his work, Poetics, he examined the elements of tragedy and drama, and he introduced the concept of catharsis, which means a purging of emotions.
That's a great word. So, what is catharsis, John?
Catharsis is the emotional release that an audience feels after watching a tragedy. Aristotle believed that through the emotions of pity and fear, people experience catharsis and come out feeling cleansed. It's like when you watch a sad movie, and afterward, you feel a strange sense of relief.
Exactly. And Aristotle's analysis of drama has shaped not only theater, but also film and literature today. He argued that a well-crafted tragedy should have a clear plot, a tragic hero, and an emotional impact on the audience. It's fascinating how those ideas still guide modern storytelling, don't you think?
Definitely. Speaking of storytelling, Aristotle also believed that stories should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, what he called unity of action. That's a principle still used in screenwriting and novel writing today. Aristotle really understood human psychology and how stories can move people.
That reminds me, Aristotle was one of the first to classify human emotions. He explored how different emotions drive behavior and how they can be controlled through reasoning. It's incredible how ahead of his time he was in understanding human nature.
And that connects to his work in politics too. Aristotle's view of human behavior wasn't just about the individual. He also believed that humans are social creatures who naturally form communities. He emphasized the importance of living in a polis, or city-state, to achieve the best life.
Oh, polis is a good word to explain. What's the meaning of polis, John?
Polis is a Greek term that refers to a city-state, which was the central political unit in ancient Greece. Aristotle believed that the polis was the ideal form of government because it allowed citizens to work together for the common good.
And he thought that the best form of government was one that balanced the needs of everyone, avoiding extremes like tyranny or anarchy. Aristotle believed in the concept of moderation. That's another important term. What does moderation mean?
Moderation means avoiding extremes and finding a middle ground. Aristotle taught that in life, it's important to practice moderation in all things, whether it's in your behavior, diet, or emotions. He believed that virtue lies in balance.
That's so interesting because it ties back to the idea of the golden mean, which we talked about earlier. Aristotle really believed that balance was the key to living a good life, not just in terms of behavior, but in society as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of society, Aristotle had some really innovative ideas about education too. As we mentioned before, he founded the Lyceum, where he taught his students in a very hands-on way. His method of peripatetic teaching, where he walked with his students while discussing philosophy, was revolutionary.
Yes, and it wasn't just about sitting in a classroom. Aristotle believed that learning happens through experience, observation, and dialogue. His approach to education was very practical and grounded in real-world learning. That's why his school was so successful and attracted students from all over Greece.
And don't forget, one of his most famous students was Alexander the Great. Can you imagine being taught by both Plato and Aristotle? It must have been an incredible education.
Oh, for sure. Alexander the Great took many of Aristotle's teachings with him as he expanded his empire. In fact, Aristotle's influence spread far beyond Greece, impacting cultures all over the ancient world. His works were later translated into Arabic, Latin, and many other languages, shaping medieval European thought too.
That's right, and that brings us to the word legacy. What does legacy mean, Emily?
Legacy refers to something handed down from one generation to another, especially in terms of knowledge or achievements. Aristotle's legacy is immense. His ideas have shaped not only science and philosophy, but also education, politics, and art. His influence is still felt today.
Exactly. It's amazing how one person's work can have such a lasting impact on the world. Aristotle's curiosity and drive to understand the world around him continue to inspire us today. Whether we're learning about biology, logic, or ethics, we can trace so much of our modern knowledge back to him.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's why it's so important to study figures like Aristotle. Not only do we learn about history, but we also gain a deeper understanding of how ideas develop and shape the world we live in today.
And speaking of learning, I think it's time for one more word. How about philosophy? It's such an important part of Aristotle's life and work. What does it mean?
Great choice. Philosophy comes from the Greek words philo, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. So philosophy is literally the love of wisdom. It's the study of fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, reason, and the universe.
Exactly. And Aristotle's approach to philosophy was very practical. He believed that philosophy wasn't just about thinking, but about living a good and meaningful life. His teachings remind us that knowledge isn't just something to be learned, it's something to be lived.
Absolutely. Aristotle's philosophy teaches us that knowledge and virtue go hand in hand. He believed that we should strive to not only understand the world, but also to improve ourselves and our communities.
And that's something we can all take away from Aristotle. Whether we're learning English or studying any other subject, the goal should always be to better ourselves and the world around us.
Wow, that was an incredible discussion. We've explored so many aspects of Aristotle's life and work today, from his contributions to biology and logic, to his ideas about rhetoric, ethics, and education. And along the way, we've learned a lot of new English words and phrases like ethos, pathos, logos, moderation, and legacy. Aristotle's influence on science, philosophy, and education is truly remarkable, and his ideas continue to inspire us even today. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to learn more fascinating topics while improving your English, make sure to subscribe to the Speak English Fluently channel. We've got plenty more amazing topics to cover, and we'll be learning together every step of the way. Thanks for joining us, and remember, stay curious and keep learning. See you in the next video.